Hello and welcome to this presentation. I'm happy that you can join me for this lovely evening. This is an in-depth presentation about the automatic watering device, which you might have seen in a previous video. We also told about that it's made to water fresh herbs from the supermarket, like these that you can buy, and they withers away very easy and very fast if you don't water them. And I cannot remember to water this herb, and therefore I always have how do you say, dead herbs instead of fresh herbs, and that's unacceptable. So this in-depth presentation will involve the parts that you need, the power supply that you need, wire connections, and the coding with the Arduino IDE program. The parts that you're going to need is a peristatic pump, which you can see on top here, which is actually the one that pumps the water into the flower or the herb. And you will need an Arduino board. I recommend a Pro Mini due to small cost and small size, but you can also use a normal Uno, for instance. Then you would need a soil moisture sensor that you can see here on the bottom, and the wire goes all the way through over to this fork, which is placed in the plant. Then you would also need some wires and some basic tools and so forth, some tape and all like small things. And the total cost of this build is around 15 or 20 euros, depending on where you get your parts. So the power supply is, at first I intended actually to only use one power supply, but then I ran into a problem with the Arduino, and it's also a China board and it's bought very cheap, so maybe that's the reason, but it couldn't handle the 12 volt without being like searing hot and like at the point where you burn your hand. And the Arduino, and in the long run, would like burn out from this heat. It can't maintain this high temperature for a long time, and I want to have my Arduino to run in like several months. So I took the decision to power the Arduino in its own power supply with a 5 volt DC input. But as you can see here, optional, you can also use a voltage divider to pull down the voltage to 5 volt from this 12 volt DC power supply. And if you want to do that, I will not tell you how to do it, but you can figure it out, I'm pretty sure, if you want to do it. So that is the options you have for power supply. And the coding, or sorry, the wiring. Here we can see which pins we have. We have over here analog pins, and we have also a lot of digital pins, and these pins on top here are used to program the Arduino. So you plug in the RX and TX and the ground and the VCC power from the FTDI USB to serial converter that you also would need if you option for the Pro Mini Arduino. So without further ado, here is the diagram that I've made to show which pins to wire in which way. So we have number 2 digital yellow wire going to the input pin on the relay, and we have a power 5 volt to go into the relay power pin and the ground, and they can be taken from up here or some other place on the board. There's also ground there, and there's a VCC there also. And the soil sensor is connected through the analog 3 pin, which will be more obvious when we go into the coding. And it is connected up to here, which says A0. And there's also digital output, which is not used for this program, but I just want to state this one is the digital one, and it's not used for here, but it can be confusing if you're not, how to say, used to using these kind of devices. So don't use the digital pin. And then we have the ground, can be connected to this one or to this one. And a 5 volt can also be connected to this one. And it's important to keep in mind that the power that these two devices draws from the Arduino must not surpass the rated current for this Arduino that which one you ever are going to use. Maybe this one or the Uno or yes. And the programming is programmed with the language C, and I use the Arduino IDE program to program the Arduino. Okay, so the code is what you see in front of you now, and at the beginning there's a lot of text. You can read that if you want to. There will also be a link for this code in the description, so you can look at it by yourself later. So we have this integer here, and that is a sensor pin. It's analog 3, so if you want another pin, you can here state that it should be another pin. And this is the input pin for the moist sensor. So if you hook it up to analog 7 or analog 4 or whichever pin, this is the place where you write which pin the sensor is connected to. And then we have another integer, which we call sensor value moist. And that's just for the pin 0, but we don't put any pins in here. This is just a variable that will store the value that is coming from the moist sensor, as it says here. And then we have another integer, and that is the pump, and that is the digital pin 2, which when it is high, it is powering the relay, which is then powering the pump for the water. And we have another integer here that is called threshold moist, and that is set to 500. So this is the threshold that determines the level of dryness in the plant before watering. So if you want a plant to dry out before you water it again, you can write a low value here. If you wanted to maintain a high humidity, you could write a high value like 500. Okay. So here we have the setup, and it's just like normal begin, and pin mode, pump is an output, and sensor value moist is an input. The loop here is very, very easy. It's first you put the sensor value moist equal to the sensor pin, which you analog read. So it reads the value from the moist sensor and make it into the sensor value moist. So the value from the sensor pin will be stored in the sensor value moist variable. Then a small break delay, 1000 milliseconds. So we go nice and easy and the Arduino don't get overburdened by this loop. And then you can use these if you want to look at the values in the serial monitor, or you can just keep it as this. If you do like this, it will serial print. So you can look on your computer how wet is it and how is it going, and if you want to nerd and geek with it, then these are a way to get data. Okay, so we have this if sentence, and this is what is powering the pump. So we have if you read the sensor value moist to be higher than the threshold moist, you will put the pump to high. So that means if the sensor value moist is higher than the threshold, which is set to 500, you turn on the pump. So if it's a high value, it's moist. Oh, sorry, it's dry, and if it has a low value, it is very wet. So what I said before is not true. You set this to low if you want a wet environment, and you set it to high if you want it like 500 or more, maybe 1,000. Okay, 1,000 would be too much, but that's how you can wiggle with it if you want to yourself. And then there's a delay for 3,000 milliseconds, which ensures that the pump doesn't over pump water out on like the table or the floor or wherever you have it. That it waits and the soil will saturate with water before it just over pumps with water. So that's why we have all these breaks. And then after 3 seconds of pumping, we'll make a digital write pump to low, so we turn the pump off. And then another delay, and then the loop starts all over again. And if you have any questions, write in the comment section, and I will try to help you if I can. And I'm still like, I consider myself still to be a noob in this programming language, or it's like a whole world that opened up to one. And it's very interesting to program, but it's not interesting when it doesn't work and you are really how do you say it, annoyed with the program. It doesn't, you don't know where the fault is, and but this is a very small one you should be able to handle, I'm pretty sure.